Thank you for being with us. So, to mark what we know is step one, phase two, is an announcement from you and the Prime Minister this morning about outdoor sport. You're joining forces with various sports stars to urge everyone to get fit again over the Easter holidays. It's almost like you think the nation's gone fat over the last 3 months of lockdown.
Well, this is why we prioritised getting grassroots sports back. We said right at the beginning, this should be the first thing that comes back after schools. And I'm glad that we are finally delivering on that because we're on track with the rollout, because we're on track with the roadmap. It means that from tomorrow, people can get out there, engage in grassroots sports. And the COVID virus has shown us how important it is for people to keep fit and have exercise. And we're encouraging people now that they can do it to get out there. And as you say, looks like there's going to be great weather at the beginning of the week. So there's no excuse not to.
But are we overweight after 3 months of sitting inside?
I've maybe added on a couple of pounds, so I should certainly try and get out and get some exercise. I think as a nation, it's really important that we ensure that we are fit in order to tackle COVID. I think quite a few people have put on a few pounds, so it's probably worth getting out there.
I think you speak for all of us there, certainly me too. So look, tomorrow, people across England will no longer be required to stay at home. That's probably the biggest change. We can now go outside and meet people outdoors, up to 5 others or another whole household. But we're also being told to continue to minimise travel wherever possible. That's the wording in the Unlock Roadmap. What does that mean in practice, minimise travel wherever possible? So, for example, how far are we allowed to go to see those 5 other people or to have a family reunion?
Well, I think the first thing throughout all of this is that British people have shown common sense in interpreting these rules. Minimised travel means that you shouldn't undertake unnecessary journeys. We're not saying to people you can't travel, but you need to just think about the impact of that. So, for example, how much social interaction you might have on the course of that journey. But if you want to go and visit Granny and see her in the garden, we're saying there's no reason for you not to anymore, as long as you do so in a safe way. That's why we have shifted from the stay-at-home message to minimise travel.
Okay, just to be clear, say you work in the south, you work in London, you want to go and visit Granny or Grandpa in North Yorkshire, for example, is that allowed?
Well, I think you'd need to think carefully about whether you could have a journey of that length without for example, staying overnight. I think it'd be quite an ask to get to and from North Yorkshire in a day without having an overnight stop. And clearly, an overnight stop is not permitted. We could go through all these different examples. I think what people have in their mind is people are sensible about this. People know that you no longer have to stay at home, but when you're travelling, you just need to think about, can you do that in a safe way, and to minimise it, so not to have many unnecessary journeys. Now, I think if you've not seen your grandparents for some time, it's perfectly reasonable to go and visit them, provided you abide by all the rest of the rules.
Foreign holidays, of course, will remain illegal for some while longer. And we believe the government is looking at a traffic light system for different countries to try and open them up at some stage. But I think we all now appreciate it's going to be very difficult for much of the summer, perhaps with third waves erupting across much of Europe. Is the trade-off, Mr. Dowden, that you're really asking of the British people, is it give up foreign holidays for pretty much this year to help facilitate return to freedom at home?
Well, clearly the situation in the rest of Europe is very worrying, and particularly given that in the past, rises in infections in Europe had led to rises in infections in the UK subsequently. I think this time round, because we've made progress with the vaccine rollout, we can be hopeful that won't happen, but it does point to having a more cautious approach. That's why we're having this international travel task force that is going to report at the very beginning of April, and that will look at whether and how we could safely resume international travel. Of course, all of us would love to have some sun over the summer, but we have to do so in a safe way.
But that's the trade-off, though, isn't it? I mean, the deal is, folks, it's going to be really unlikely we could go on holiday this summer. I think it's reasonably fair to level with people about that now, isn't it? Although, there may be some restrictions and some countries allowed off. But the deal is you get freedom at home because we won't be importing variants or the virus.
Well, we need to ensure that if there is international travel, it's done in a safe way. Clearly, you're right to highlight the risk of new strains entering the UK and the challenges that will pose for international travel. But we are looking at all these factors as part of the international travel review, and that will be reporting at the beginning of next week. If we can enable international travel in a safe way, of course we will allow that to happen. But you're absolutely right to highlight the challenges faced with that. And I should say also, as the minister responsible for tourism in the UK, there are some fantastic opportunities to book breaks in the UK as well.
I thought you might want to slip that in. Well done. Let's move on to a couple of other areas of your brief. Sport, obviously a big one. Sport is beginning to reopen in terms of ground sport anyway. But the Euros are also coming from European Championships, which of course should have been held last summer. Now, we're holding 11 out of those 51 international games in the UK. It should have been all around Europe. The Prime Minister's made this big offer of hosting all of them if Europe is still struggling with its third wave. What's the progress on that? Have UEFA accepted that offer?
Well, the offer is there for UEFA. My focus at the moment as Secretary of State is making sure we deliver on the key parts of the tournament in the UK. And remember, we have the key parts. We have the finals and the semi-finals, and of course we have a number of group matches. So to make sure we deliver those safely and deliver that with as large audiences as possible. If it is the case that UEFA wants to come to us to host more matches, then of course our door is always open for them. But they are the hosts of the tournament. It's for them to come to us. But
they haven't done that yet.
Well, we continue to have conversations with them, but they've not formally requested it, no.
Something that is happening is the Premier League are going to ask you to allow 1,000 opposition supporters into grounds for clubs. The final 2 games this season, mid-May onwards. Now, obviously, you're allowing a certain amount of home supporters back, but would you look at opposition supporters returning too?
Well, we'll look at all the options. Remember, it's from stage 3 of the roadmap, so the middle of May, that we'll be able to have fans back socially distanced, up to an increased cap, by the way, of 10,000 people in very big stadiums. And as part of that, we will review the rules associated with it. So that no final decision has been made on that yet.
Sounds possible, though.
Well, we'll set out the rules in the usual way. So if you remember, what we do is we have an easement, then we have 4 weeks to analyse the impact, and then a week before we set out the rules. Of course, this is an opportunity to look at it again. So I don't rule it out, but I think people should work on the assumption that it's the similar rules to last summer. But of course, we'll look at it again.
Okay. Let me put this to you. Thierry Henry, former captain of Arsenal, major international footballer for France, he announced yesterday that he's coming off all social media because he's sick and tired of the racist abuse he receives on it. This is your area as well, both sport and, of course, digital. That's in your title. Let me ask you this. Why is the government still tolerating racial abuse being openly handed out on social media platforms? Because it is illegal to say precisely this sort of thing in the street. Why have you not made it illegal to say it on Twitter?
Well, this is an area of really big concern to me. And a couple of months ago now, I met with players, including people like Tyrone Mings and Anton Ferdinand, and they talked about the scale of abuse they have. Last thing at night, first thing in the morning, when they're looking on their social media. That's why we're committed to bringing forward our online harms legislation. And the most important provision of that is to make what's illegal on the street illegal online, and to make sure that social media companies have proper regimes in place to remove illegal content. And if they fail to do that, they could face fines of up to 10% of their global revenue. And if you think of a large social media company, I won't choose one to name, but they have multi-billion pounds worth of revenue. That is a very strong sanction.
So racism on Twitter against someone like Thierry will be illegal under your plans?
If it's illegal in the street, it will be illegal online, and the 3 duties we'll be imposing on social media companies. Number 1 of them is to make sure you remove illegal content, whether that's child abuse and exploitation, or whether that's terrorist content, or whether it's illegal racist abuse.
Arlene Foster, the First Minister of Northern Ireland, was on this programme a couple of weeks ago. She made, I thought, what was a really interesting point. She said the only reason she thinks she gets so much personal abuse, and she really does, not just about her politics, about her looks as well, is because people can do it anonymously with no fear of redress whatsoever. Would you like to see social media end the practice of anonymous tweeting or posting so you can actually be identified for everything you post?
Well, Well, first of all, I sympathise enormously with what Arlene Foster said, and I think the lack of respect for women and the sort of misogyny that we see online is very, very worrying. In terms of the anonymity question, there are reasons for having anonymity. Just take two examples. For example, if you are looking to flee domestic violence, or if, for example, you're a teenager exploring your sexuality, you don't want others to know about it. There are legitimate grounds for preserving anonymity. So whilst we continue to keep this under review, that I'm just a bit concerned about a blanket ban on anonymity.
That does also mean you're not blanket banning abuse either. You'll know that will continue as long as people can tweet anonymously. We all get it.
Well, this is why we're bringing forward the online harms legislation. This is the first time government has set about tackling this, and this is why we've got robust provisions for illegal content protecting children and legal but harmful. But I do also have to weigh up the other benefits of having anonymity online.
Okay, can we talk about vaccines briefly? Is a deal with the European Union close? We know you've been talking for a good week or so now on to end this standoff. There's been friendly statements, it's all looking positive, but when will we see a deal? And crucially, can you rule out it involving the UK agreeing to share output from AstraZeneca's Helix subcontracted factory in the Netherlands when they come online?
Well, the UK position is as agreed actually with Ursula von der Leyen in the call she had with the Prime Minister a while ago, which is that we don't expect blocking of vaccine exports, and we expect companies to be able to honour their contracts and to deliver those vaccines. We're having constructive discussions, but those are the parameters of it. But more broadly, we'll remain confident, and this is the important thing for your listeners to understand, that we will deliver on those two remaining milestones. So by the middle of April, anyone over the age of 50 or in a vulnerable group will be able to have access to a first vaccine, and that by the end of July, we'll have offered a first vaccine to every adult.
Second doses, that's now becoming a major concern for everybody who's had their first dose, which is, of course, more than half the adult population now. And you'll be aware that France's Foreign Minister, Jean-Yves Le Drian, said earlier this weekend that the UK, and I quote, the UK is proud to have vaccinated many people with their first dose, but they will have a problem with the second dose. Now, you say this isn't true. You think you're going to be able to second dose everybody who's had their first dose as a guarantee. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But is he right to worry a lot of older people, for example, in this country by saying that?
Well, I don't think he's correct at all. And certainly in all of the planning that we have had around vaccine rollout, we have been absolutely clear of the need to factor in that second dose within 12 weeks. And we are confident that we can deliver that. And anyone listening who's had their first dose should feel confident that the government has properly planned to have that second dose.
Confident, or can you guarantee a second dose?
Well, guarantee, because that is through all our planning, we have always known that actually the most important thing, rather than having further first doses, is to get the second dose, because those are the most vulnerable people and they need that top up, and they need to have the confidence in respect of it. So every meeting that I've been in relation to vaccine rollout, that we've always been clear on the need to prioritise that.
I think a lot of people would have heard Monsieur Le Drian's comments and potentially been left quite worried by them. They might have thought, well, is the British government really telling me the truth? What is your message to Monsieur Le Drian on his scaremongering, as you might put it?
Well, I think that what he said is simply not correct, and I think that anyone listening to it should not worry about the commentary from a third government. We're very clear that we have those vaccines for the second dose.
Why is a third-party government making this sort of commentary? Because it really is pretty inflammatory.
Well, I'm afraid you'd have to ask him that. What he said is not correct, and people should take reassurance that it's not correct.
Okay. Let's move on a little bit. Another final area of your expertise, of course, is flags. It was your announcement this week to put flags on every government building. May I ask, you obviously can control all government buildings, and that's a lot of flags that are going to have to be made. But what about other national landmarks? Places like Wembley Stadium, the Albert Hall, perhaps famous theatres. Would you personally like to see them fly the national flag as well?
Well, and I think like many people in this country, but most people that that I meet take tremendous pride in our union flag. Many countries around the world fly in from their government buildings, and I'm glad that we have changed the rules to that effect. Of course, it's up to individual organisations whether they fly the union flag, but I think it's a great sight to see the union flag flying above buildings. And actually, it's not only internationally people actually take pride in the Union Jack. They see it as a great symbol of our nation, and I'm glad to see it flying.
A couple of people who perhaps aren't so proud of, maybe I'm speaking for them too much, is a couple of BBC breakfast presenters who took a bit of flack this week for teasing one of your cabinet colleagues about having the flag in his office. Do you agree with the Prime Minister who told a meeting of the Tory 1922 Committee of Backbenchers this week that, and I quote, there is a degree of instinctive metropolitan bias in the BBC newsroom?
Well, I have three concerns about the BBC, which I'm happy to repeat again. One is that they need to have genuine impartiality. That is to say, the impartiality can't be confined to the newsroom. It needs to be throughout all of their output, and it should reflect all different perspectives in the UK. Secondly, they do need to reflect all different parts of the United Kingdom, not just the Brightons and the Bristols and the Hackneys of this world, but also the Lees and the Dudleys and the Boreham Woods of this world, to take an example from my own constituency. And I think sometimes comments like the ones we saw in that interview begin to stray from banter into a sneering of attitude against attitudes that are held by many, many people in this country.
Could you just clarify what an unnecessary journey is?
I've said repeatedly what an unnecessary journey is. So first of all, people know instinctively what an unnecessary journey is. We've moved the rules from being stay at home to you don't have to stay at home. So if you feel you want to meet Granny or go and undertake many of the other things that you can do now. So for example, you can go and participate in grassroots sports. We're saying you're allowed to do that now, but you shouldn't be having excessive travel beyond what you need to do.
So, but what defines that? Could you give me a practical example of what an unnecessary journey is? So you can say, I can see Granny, doesn't matter where Granny lives, but what's unnecessary? What would be unnecessary? If I go and see some friends up north, would that be unnecessary in their garden?
Well, I think if you take repeated journeys, I don't know, for example, you decide to meet many different people, travel many distances, and that means that you are stopping at service stations, you're having lots of social interaction. Remember, in all of this, it's worth taking a step back. Why are we saying this in the first place, right? The reason why we're saying this in the first place is that we know that this disease thrives on social interaction. And whilst we want to enable people to go and visit Granny or to go and participate in outdoor sports, people should think carefully about whether it is worth the cost in terms of having those unnecessary social interactions, because every one additionally of those adds to the risk of virus transmission. Now, we're willing to take some risk now, and the reason why we're willing to take some risk is because we're getting the disease under control, and crucially, we've got the vaccine rollout. But to take a proportionate and measured approach to that. And I think most people get that.
OK, Mr. Dunn, I think it's OK to go and see Granny or Grandpa in North Yorkshire as long as you don't stay overnight. I think we'll take that away from you if we possibly
it's clearly the case that you're not allowed to stay overnight.